Well, welcome once again, everybody. I'm Jean Massey, and I'm the Executive Director at FairVote Minnesota, and I'm just thrilled that you could join us for our first of 5 democracy town halls across Minnesota between now and the end of March. We started on the east side, northeast side for good reasons. We have a lot of strong democracy champions in this part of the state, and we wanted to make sure you all had an opportunity to give voice to the work that you're all doing. We are really at a crossroads in the evolution of our democracy. I think we have a question to ask, and that is, are we really going to proceed down the path of misinformation and autocracy and political violence, or are we going to make the changes necessary to build a more resilient, representative, responsive, and inclusive democracy? The fact that so many of you have joined us this Sunday afternoon gives me great hope. We must all join together and commit to this crucial moment to the work of reform to strengthen our democracy. For more than 2 decades, FairVote Minnesota has led the movement to empower Minnesota voters with more choice and more power in our elections through more equitable voting systems. We believe ranked choice voting is key to achieving this goal. And toward that end, we have trained and mobilized thousands of volunteers, educated hundreds and thousands of voters, and secured breakthrough wins for ranked choice voting in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, St. Louis Park, and most recently in Bloomington and Minnetonka. We are among the dozens of cities and states using ranked choice voting, including the states of Maine and Alaska, and this year, New York City. Even before the events of January 6th, we were seeing growing momentum for ranked choice voting and other reforms here in Minnesota and across the country. But now it really is no time to wait. We must accelerate these reforms, and that is the conversation we are going to have this evening. We have an amazing lineup of democracy champions with us tonight, including our special guest, Attorney General Keith Ellison, Minority Leader Susan Kent, Senators John Marty and Chuck Wiger, and Representatives Dave Pinto, Peter Fischer, Kaohly, Steve Sandell, and Athena Hollins. And all of you have been supporters or co-signers of the ranked choice voting legislation. Thank you for that. We also have St. Paul Council members with us tonight, Rebecca Naker and Nelsie Yang. Thank you all for being here and being such strong champions of democracy. Our state and our nation needs your leadership now more than ever. Now it is my pleasure to hand the mic to Clean Elections Minnesota leader, George Beck. He has been championing the fight against big money in politics as long as I've known him, and he helped bring ranked choice voting to his home city of St. Louis Park. Please help me in welcoming my friend, George Beck.
Thank you, Jean. My name is George Beck, and I chair Clean Elections Minnesota. It's a nonpartisan nonprofit that works on democracy reform here in our state. I want to tell you what we're interested in this session just briefly. We're following Representative Greenman's HF 9, a clean elections bill that includes a number of very important issues like public financing, dark money contributions, felons voting, automatic voter registration, and sending absentee ballots to all voters. This is making its way through the House, and we're very grateful for the support it has received. I think it's passed 3 committees now. We're also very interested and concerned about Senate File 173, which is a voter suppression bill that would have voter ID and provisional balloting implemented in Minnesota. Looks to us like it's simply voter suppression and unneeded, even though it would cost taxpayers money. We hope to see a hearing on national popular vote. We hope to see redistricting reform go to hearing. And of course, ranked choice voting. Thank you.
Thank you, George Beck. You and your organization and several other organizations are working so hard to bring important reforms here to Minnesota. And I should remind people the bill for ranked choice voting is House File 89 and Senate File 218. So now I'd like to introduce our special guest, Keith Ellison, Attorney General Keith Ellison. It was 15 years ago, about in 2006, when we were organizing to get ranked choice voting on the Minneapolis ballot. Then State Representative Keith Ellison, who was making it for his first run for Congress, came to us and said, "I'm in." He was among the first elected leaders representing Minneapolis to see the power of ranked choice voting to give more voice to the people. His work now as Attorney General has been critical in preventing intimidation at the polls and protecting voter access and voter rights. There has been no stronger and more consistent champion protecting the will of the people in the legislature, in Congress, and now in the office of Attorney General than Keith Ellison. Please join me in welcoming democracy champion, superhero, Keith Ellison.
Thanks a lot, Jean. I really am glad to be here with everybody. And I want to thank all of you for coming together on a Sunday afternoon to talk about my favorite subject and certainly Jean's favorite subject, democracy. I mean, the fact is that if January 6th teaches us anything, we need to deepen democracy. We need to extend more choices for people. We need to have a voting system which encourages candidates not to polarize, but to bring people together. We need a voting system that reaches out to everyone. And, you know, one of my campaign slogans when I'm not in my official job is everybody counts, everybody matters. Well, that goes for voting, for sure. I believe that we have got to think more creatively about how to get more ballots in more people's hands. And then we need to help educate people and help answer their questions and be available for them so that they can have a say in their own lives. You know, I'm proud to be a Minnesotan for many reasons, one of which is that we got about 80% last time. I mean, that's truly remarkable. And, you know, but what about the other 20%? We ought to all be dissatisfied, upset, figuring out ways where we can get that other 20%. That's a lot of people in a state where there's 5.6 million of us. We should be able to make sure that people have a right to make their own choices. I want to just say that I absolutely am a very proud supporter of ranked choice voting. It's a great idea. It has worked. It's not too complicated. It's not confusing. It's actually pretty simple. And I love it when people have ranked choice voting for like cakes and stuff like that, because then it shows, you know, just how simple and straightforward that it is. It has put us in a position to have a more representative municipal government in Minneapolis and many other places around our state. And I hope it grows. Let me just say this about my role in voting as Attorney General. As your Attorney General, I was called upon on many occasions this last election to be very busy. We've defended the voting system. One of the things we had to go to court for is something that I want to tell you about, but I don't want to leave off all the stuff. I want to say that, you know, we actually went to court in a multi-state group to fight for the United States Postal Service when Curtis DeJoy was trying to undermine it, slow it down, so that because he knew that people were going to be voting by mail and he was going to interfere with that for the benefit of his favorite choice. We went to court for it, we fought him, we won, and I'm glad about it. And we went on many other things as well, and I was proud every time. One thing in particular I want to share with everybody that is particularly concerning to me, particularly in light of January 6th and other things, is the bill that Representative Greenman is supporting, which I 100% support. Article 3 of her proposed legislation, I think, is particularly important, and it governs voter intimidation, interference, and deceptive practices. You know, the bill would expand the scope of the Attorney General's jurisdiction to include civil investigation and enforcement of regulating voter intimidation, interference, and deceptive practices. And, you know, the reason is really, really clear, that there is a gap in the civil law. Now, some of you may remember that we did have to swing into action last election, and we are certain that we had a solid legal basis for our action. The court agreed. But I think this is a place where the law could be more explicit. Currently, we have voter intimidation provisions in the criminal law, which requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and which may give fewer tools for stopping a more imminent threat. You know, short of arrest, there's not clear mechanism for something like an injunction. Expressly giving the Attorney General's office civil enforcement will allow us to act swiftly, to not have to worry about appeals of our authority, to enforce Minnesota's voter protection laws and protect democracy. So it's a provision I think is very important. Let me reiterate, I think we have the authority now. We used it last election, but I'd like to see it written explicitly in the law, because for sure in this litigious society we live in, we don't want to waste time going up and down the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court just to find our authority. We want it written in the law now, though we believe we have it. Some of you may have seen in the news an explicit example of where we use this authority. Back in the middle of October last year, my office launched an investigation into a Tennessee-based security company called Atlas Agents. Some of y'all saw that. And this company was saying that they wanted to recruit private security guards to be near polling places. They suggested that they would be armed. After our investigation was started, we settled with the company and were able to enter into what's a settlement agreement where they agreed to, one, not intimidate voters in Minnesota or elsewhere in connection with the election, and not provide any protective agent services in Minnesota from October 22nd, 2020 through January 1st, 2022. So we're gonna keep them out of here for a minute. And they also agreed to communicate to each and every listserv, job board, and person who they were in touch with that it was wrong to suggest that the scope of work would include, quote, protection of election polls. So now that particular case, it happened to work out under current law because we were able to settle and because we believe we do have the authority. Having specific detailed authority in the law would make everything much simpler, would dissuade litigious battles over our jurisdiction and authority, and it would also do something else. It would put us in a position where if something happens close to the election, we could act very swiftly. Right now, under current law, that we have to, if we want to seek interference with election activity, the current law might give them 20 days to respond. We had to go to court to have the court shorten the response time to 10 days. Under the legislation, we wouldn't have to do that. We would have the authority we need. Had the companies really been trying to fight us and going through all kinds of changes, things may have gone different. Luckily, they decided to cooperate. The proposal in Emma's bill would make a clearer path and would make it much easier for us to stand up and fight against and prevent deceptive practices that interfere with a free and fair election. So I just wanted to talk with you all about that in particular, and I'd be happy to, I'm gonna stick around because I always learn stuff when I'm in meetings like this. So I'm grateful for your leadership. And Gene, thanks for the kind words you said about me, but you know that I get my inspiration from folks who are leading the band on this call and from you. So with that, I'll just turn it over, but thanks for having me.
Well, thank you again, Attorney General Keith Ellison, and for sharing some of the depth about House File 9. There are so many good election bills right now, House File 9, the ranked choice voting bill, House File 89. And I know that there's a bill that is just being introduced on protecting felony voting rights. So lots happening, and we'll get into all those details throughout our Q&A tonight. So thank you so much for being here and for sticking around and for firing us up for tonight's conversation. You always know how to do that really well. I'd like to now turn the conversation over to Katie Humphrey, who is FairVote Minnesota's campaigns manager, who has been organizing in labor and politics on the range and beyond in Minnesota for more than a decade and knows how to win on issues that really matters for the people of Minnesota. She's a powerhouse, and we are fortunate at FairVote Minnesota to have her help as we push forward on ranked choice voting here across the state. Katie will introduce our elected leaders and moderate our Q&A with all of you tonight. And I just want to remind you, if you have a question, you can send it directly to me. I'll be picking those up and providing them back to Katie for the Q&A after we hear from our elected leaders. Katie, please take it away.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the nice introduction, Jean. We are so fortunate to have Jean Massey as our fearless leader here at FairVote Minnesota. And thank you to all of our elected officials for joining us today. I'm not seeing the questions, Jean. Did you have one to start out with?
Well, we'll first hear from all of the elected leaders, Katie.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. I'm going to kick it over to Senator John Marty to start out with here. Senator Marty, I know you've got some time constraints, so why don't you do the honors of kicking us off here today?
Thank you. I'm glad to join you and wanted to say mainly how pleased I am to have the progress I see us making on ranked choice voting. I think we're getting close. I wish we would get a vote in the Senate on it, but I think it's about time. It's long overdue that we have ranked choice voting, not only so it represents the will of the people, avoids the spoiler problem, which in several elections, there was one party picking up, getting candidates to run in order to serve as spoilers. It avoids that problem. But the other thing that I appreciate is that ranked choice voting stops candidates from attacking each other so much. They start talking about what they're for instead of what's wrong with the other people. And I think that improves our democracy. But that, and there's so many other issues we have. Emma's bill has been mentioned already, has so many provisions in it. I think we have to work on our move to amend legislation to overturn Citizens United. The campaign finance reform issues have not gotten better, they've gotten worse. And a lot of work to do, but I just wanted to say that, and I can stay around for a few minutes yet, but wanted to wish you the best in anything I can do to join all the rest of you in pushing for ranked choice voting. Let me know.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us today, Senator Marty. Next, I'll go over to Minority Leader Susan Kent. Senator Kent, if you're able to say a few remarks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. And thank you all for gathering here today for this great conversation. Really great to hear from Attorney General Ellison, as always. But I really want to thank you for all the work that you do to advocate and push for expanding our democracy every day, because it makes a real difference. As we sit here at the end of February, which is a little hard to believe that we're already at the end of February, that's the good news, I think, because that means it actually will be warming up sometime soon. That I think back to this most recent election. Obviously, I know a lot of the conversations that we're having are, for some organizations, definitely nonpartisan, and in theory and in principle, they should be nonpartisan. But as you look at the Minnesota Senate, that's just not the case, because when you think about who chairs and who leads on the Senate Committee of State Government and Elections, that's why not only can we not move forward with something like ranked choice voting, but they're actually trying to take it away from communities or eliminate the option for local communities to enact it on their own behalf. So when you think about this past election, and this has to do with elections and democracy, it's interesting to note that DFL Senate candidates got 100,000 more votes than Republican Senate candidates across the state. And that's really not so much a factor of gerrymandering from the last go round with the last redistricting. It's really a function of the way our state has changed and the way that we have had so many population increases in districts like mine and Senator Marty's and in Minneapolis, and we've seen population declines in the other ones. So that's how you can have such a lopsided vote total and yet still have the Republicans maintain a 1-seat majority in the Minnesota Senate. And so that's why elections matter, and that's why it's so important that we do this work. The Senate DFL caucus just this week rolled out our caucus priorities. We took some time to do that, partly because we have 7 wonderful new members who joined us after this last election, and we wanted to make sure they were fully a part of that conversation and could have their voices be heard as we, as a caucus, came together to identify our priorities. And just very quickly, I will say that there are 4 themes that we were really working with. The first 3, supporting working families, investing in our schools and students, and providing a clean future. That sounds like good priorities, but I want to highlight the 4th one because it is important. And when you think about the fact that the legislature convened on January 5th this year, and then we all saw what happened on January 6th and since, And our caucus named our fourth priority, which is really kind of in some ways, I think, saving the big one for the last, is to protect and advance our democracy. Because we know how important that is. And we know the threat that is being posed on so many different ways. And this isn't just about January 6th. This is about an ongoing, persistent agenda. The misinformation, as we've talked about so-called election fraud over years, decades, that have led to voter suppression legislation, not just here in Minnesota, but around the country. But then you also look at what they're proposing now, and George mentioned them. They are pushing for a voter ID again, and they are pushing for provisional ballots. And so we thought it was very important that as the Senate DFL caucus, that we take a stand and say that we stand for truth. We stand for facts and actual legitimate information about what happens in our elections, not the lies that have been told and we imagine will continue to be told, and for the measures that make sure that we are expanding that access, protecting our democracy. You have to do that first. And then to make sure that everybody's opportunity to participate in this most fundamental right and to have their voices count, as Keith Ellison said, is what really matters. Lindsey Port is our chief author on the big Democracy for the People Act. But we have just about every single member of our caucus has signed on to one of the clone bills because this is such a priority for us. And so we're grateful for her leadership and her passion and the talents that she's bringing to our caucus. And we are all standing together to make sure that we can move forward to ensure that Minnesotans' voices are heard every time around. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Minority Leader Kent, and thank you for your leadership and for all of your hard work. Next, I'm going to bring it over to Representative Pinto in 64B. Representative Pinto, if you want to say a few remarks.
I will do that. I had to take my camera off for a second to let a family member in. We're all in Zoom world, but here I am. So good to see everybody. State Representative Dave Pinto from the southwestern part of St. Paul, Highland Park, Mac Groveland area. I guess I do want to do, as Leader Kent did, do a shout out to our Attorney General Keith Ellison, because it is always so energizing to hear him, and he's doing incredible work in all kinds of areas. And so I'm so glad to be with him and to be with all of you. And I guess I'll just note two things that spring to my mind. So one is just that, like, whatever else we can say about ranked choice voting, it's just fundamentally democracy should reflect actual voters' preferences as to results. And this is a method that does that more effectively. We can talk about the various political ramifications and various things that come out of that, but just at a fundamental level, let's just acknowledge that voters are going to have preferences where they might prefer one candidate a little bit, but then their next choice is this one and their third choice is that one. Our democracy should reflect that. And I guess the other point is just to thank all of you, as been thanked before, for taking the time today, because there's just nothing more fundamental right now than how our democracy works. And we know that if we get that right, lots of good things flow from it. And boy, we can tell that when we get it wrong, there's some really bad consequences. And I think that we can feel those consequences, feel the impact, how important these issues are. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for joining with us and participating with us. This is, our democracy is not a spectator sport, and you were showing that this afternoon. Let's keep on working together. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Pinto. I could not agree more that democracy is not a spectator sport, and it absolutely is one of the top key issues as we're moving into 2021 here. Next, I'd like to kick it over to Representative Sandell in 53B. Representative Sandell, if you're able to give a few remarks here.
Thank you, Katie. It's a pleasure. And Jean, you know, it was your invitation that got me involved in this work for ranked choice voting. My office at the legislature is right around the corner from Steve Elkin. So between you and Steve, I have a couple of great partners and people I can depend on for this effort. And I certainly am proud to be part of it. I'm also in 53, and Susan Kent is my partner in 53. And I think that this is a particularly interesting district because it's growing so quickly. My legislative district had more voters than any other legislative district in the state. Some people will say that 2020 is a tough year and 2021 has been tough as well. But I think it's a propitious time for the work that Keith Ellison is talking about, that John and Dave are talking about. This is a time when democracy has to ring true, and I believe that there's an enthusiasm for it. There's an up and down in politics, national politics and local politics as well. And I've been around long enough to see all of that happen, from the early bus boycotts in Montgomery, Alabama, to the protests that have happened recently. But I believe there's a vitality in democracy, and I think that ranked choice voting is an example of how it is we can put votes in the hands of people and democracy and a majority of leaders in office. So thanks, Jean, for your help, and thanks for everybody else. And boy, oh boy, talking to more than 100 people on a Sunday afternoon is wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Representative Sandell. And you're absolutely right. There is a big enthusiasm around the issue right now. And it's just been really exciting to see the momentum growing and growing. So thank you for joining us. Next, I'd like to kick it over to Representative Herr. Representative Herr, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're able to make a few quick remarks.
Hi, Katie. Good evening, everyone. So glad to be here with all of you. Voting really matters to me. And I think that in America, we take voting for granted. I came from a country where I had no rights. I was born in Laos. We did not have the right to almost anything because we were an ethnic minority. And coming to this country, I understood the idea of voting in the process, but it was really hard for me to engage in the process. And I think like most people, we are disenfranchised by the process. I often tell people that I actually didn't vote for the first time until I voted for Obama. And I think that people find that kind of interesting because truthfully, I mean, as a refugee and an immigrant, I was just busy trying to survive, right? To not have to rely on my parents, to try to, get through school, because I didn't have parents navigating that. I didn't have any social culture capital to help me through this process. And when I I was letting everybody make decisions for me, and I felt the same way everybody else felt, that the system is really disenfranchising, that, the negativity that is in politics discourages us, that we don't like our choices that are given to us, right? Like until Obama showed up, I never thought there was a good choice, right? And so for me, really understanding that I'm an educated person, I have no barriers around language and time, and yet I did not engage in the voting process until my 30s. And when I think about what prevents people from getting to that place, like ranked choice voting would address a lot of these issues. It would make the process so that it's easier for people to navigate. It would make it so that there is less negativity, in the campaigning process. It would make it so that, people felt like even if they couldn't get their first choices, that they were still participating in the process that allowed them to choose subsequent individuals that they could get behind. And so, this is really important to me. And I show up every day, not just because I'm an elected official and that I think this is what I'm supposed to do. It's because I know that it matters. And that the people who are most hurt by not engaging in this process are BIPOC people, people who are from low income communities, people who have language barriers, people who have barriers to time and access and resources. Like those are the people most hurt. And we have to fix this process so that we can engage all of those individuals. And our process is very exclusionary of young people, which is why I'm really super excited about Representative Greenman's bill, because in it allows pre-registration of anybody who is at least 16 years of age, because we need to start engaging people sooner. We need that to happen. And so I really appreciate all the work that all of you do, and that this process, you are making it a more inclusive process. You are making it a process in which those who are the most disenfranchised and most marginalized get to participate in this process. So I just want to say thank you to everybody, and thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Thank you so much, Representative Herr, for your powerful testimony and for bringing up some really, really key important points. Thank you so much. And then next, I wanted to bring it over to Representative Hollins. Representative Hollins is in 66B. Representative Hollins, if you could give a few remarks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here today. I'm Athena Hollins. I am a new representative in District 66B, and that's sort of the northern neighborhoods of the city of St. Paul. Everybody who's gone before me has done such an amazing job. I don't think that I could do better at explaining my passion for democracy and voting and for ranked choice voting. But what I will do is try to, kind of like what Representative Herr did, is kind of center us in where we are in history. My father was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. And so I grew up knowing about poll taxes and literary tests and all of the things and the barriers that were put in place for African Americans in the Jim Crow South. And, you know, things have changed, but not really in the way that we would like them to. They're not as obvious, but they're still happening. And I see ranked choice voting as a part of all of this discussion and where we are as a country and what we want to see for the people in our country. I think, you know, having one person, one vote is such an important aspect of what we stand for as Americans and in the United States, that ranked choice voting is absolutely necessary to accomplish that. The last thing I'll say is, you know, I think we've all been in situations in elections where there are several people who we'd really like to vote for, who we really think are good candidates. And I love that ranked choice voting gives me the opportunity to vote for both of those candidates and to really make my voice heard and known. And to me, that is the epitome of participating in democracy. And so I really look forward to a robust discussion on this, and I hope that folks feel free to reach out if they have any additional questions, but I'm looking forward to answering questions. So, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Representative Hollins, and thank you so much for joining us today. I believe, unless I'm missing any House members or any senators who maybe hopped on late, I'm just scanning my screen here. I believe we'll move into our question segment now, and I will give it back to Jean, who's been taking questions in the chat box.
Well, we have several great questions already starting, so thank you very much for doing that. We've got one here actually for the local use of ranked choice voting. We have it in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and now expanded it in St. Louis Park and Bloomington and Minnetonka. We've got a couple of council members here from St. Paul who might be able to provide a perspective of the experience of ranked choice voting at the local level. Katie?
Fantastic. Do we still have Council Member Knocker with us?
Hi, Rebecca Naker here. How's it going?
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here. So it's very inspiring to hear everyone else talk about how important voting is and just how important ranked choice voting is to helping people feel comfortable voting. I actually had an experience when I ran for the first time in 2015. I was completely new to politics. I was very far from being embedded in the DFL or in any political party. And ranked choice voting actually gave me the confidence as a brand new candidate to put myself out there and run. I think often, especially for young women, you know, there's this fear that if you're running, you're being negative, you're putting yourself ahead of somebody else. I think in Minnesota, we really don't like to talk about ourselves compared to other people. Ranked choice voting gave me that confidence to go up to somebody's door and say, you know what, I might not be your first choice. You might never have heard of me. Can I be your second choice, right? And sometimes those second choice conversations actually turned into first choice conversations. So I think that not only to give people more choice at the voting booth, but also to encourage new candidates who we desperately need to get involved. And I think we're seeing that more. In St. Paul, I am now part of a supermajority female council for the first time in history. And I will tell you that that is a dramatically different working environment from the council that I joined just a few years ago. So I think we're already starting to see new people stepping up, and I think ranked choice voting helps those folks feel comfortable putting their voices in the mix.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And do we still have Councilmember Yang on the line to give some feedback to the question? Councilmember Yang, are you here? Looks like we may have dropped her.
All right. Well, if she comes back on, we'd love to hear her experience as well. Looks like we have a question here for Attorney General Ellison in terms of the 20% of voters who didn't participate in our election this year. who are they and what do we do to reach them and make sure they do engage?
That is an excellent question. Who are they? We got to know who they are if we're going to go get them. Well, they are a mixed bag, as you might guess, but they do concentrate in certain parts of our society. They're people who may work really long hours. They might start their shift before election polls open, and they might still be working when they close. This is why early voting is so important. This is why voting by mail is so important. They might be people who are just, they're not sure whether it matters. And that's why knocking on doors and telling them, yeah, it really does matter. And, you know, your involvement is super important. That's why, you know, this kind of stuff we're doing tonight is super, super important. And there might be people who maybe got a mailing that said, hey, Republicans vote on Tuesday, Democrats vote on Wednesday. You think that's not written? No. If you're super busy and you're trying to get 4 kids to school and on the bus, and you hear that, you might think you have a day, but you really don't. So that's who it is. When they have done polling on people who didn't vote, and they often say, we didn't vote because one, I didn't have the time. And for people who are middle class and even more wealthy than that, that sounds ridiculous. But if you're a hardworking, low income person, scratching it out at minimum wage, 2-3 jobs, going from one side of town to the other on public transportation, that's a real problem. And they also report people who just aren't aware. And you might think, well, how could they not be aware? They're not. And so we've got to extend ourselves. And that's why we need no door knocking, we need reaching out, and we need engagement. And by the way, here's a stat for you, and I'll hand it over. About 80% of the people who make $150,000 a year or more, regardless of party, they vote. So if you're making good money, you're probably voting. People who make below 50,000, their voter turnout, and if you look at the years going by, drops to around 35%. So there is a very strong economic component to this. So with that, I'll just turn it back.
Yeah, thank you, Attorney General Ellison. We've got work to do. 20% is still a lot. So that's all on us to make our systems that much more engaging and effective, again, which is the conversation tonight. We have a few questions all related to kind of what's the status of legislation around ranked choice voting. I'll just say up front, there, House File 89 and Senate File 289 have both maxed on their authorship on the bills and have clone bills. And it looks like House File 9 also has clone bill, at least in the Senate. So these are popular bills. People want to make democracy work, and 2021 is a year for democracy. So if there is anyone on the House side and Senate side who can speak to the status of where those bills are, that would be great.
Well, I'll just say on the Senate side, it's a short answer, and it's that they're going to be blocked again. That the chair of the State Government and Elections Committee is going to refuse to hear them and will try to advance a completely anti voter access agenda.
That's correct. So the work at FairVote Minnesota is continue to do a lot of education in the Senate and hope for that opportunity in 2 years' time. We hope to pass it in the House. And Representative Pinto or someone else, could you speak to the status in the House?
I'll start as long as you said my name, but I can imagine some of my colleagues will have at least as good information. And just note that I feel like there's strong support in general. The numbers in the House this term are much tighter than they were last term. And so things are that much more complicated and getting all kinds of good things, such as this, moved along. But I wonder, I'm just going to see if one of my colleagues, I do not serve on the committee that's that hears election-related bills. And first, I'm trying to remember if any of my colleagues on the call do, and would invite them to feel free to jump in if they have further insight.
I don't believe we do, but Representative Sandell, if you'd be able to speak to that.
I was just going to say that, thank you, Katie. I'm just going to say that it's been referred to the State Government and Elections Committee, but there's been no hearing. But you're right, Gene. Boy, the list of co-authors is really broad and strong, and I expect the bill to get out of that committee. Where it'll go next, I'm not quite sure. Dave, do you know?
I don't know if there would be other committee, and I suspect actually the Gene or our terrific team at FairVote may have thoughts as to where the bill would need to go after that. It's a slightly simpler committee structure, I feel like, with regard to bills such as this, maybe than it was previously. Maybe I'll just ask if folks have a sense as to where the bill would need to go after state gov finance. With any, if at all, maybe just to the floor.
Our understanding is that it'll have financial components, so likely Ways and Means. So we understand that Chair Nelson of the committee has committed to having a hearing. So we should expect that soon, and then it would probably go to Ways and Means after that. So we are hopeful that we'll move it on to the floor and hopefully have full passage on the floor this year. That's our goal. For all of you who engaged in that process, we're grateful. And we really hope the same thing for House File 9, right? We want to push all of these bills forward. And I do want to correct, I said 289 for the Senate bill, it's 218, should anyone have a chance to vote on it in the Senate. Thank you for those questions. We've got a couple of questions on just how we as voters help really push these bills forward. Katie, do you want to volley that one around?
Sure. Let's see. Could we go to Representative Hollins on that question?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I think actually as voters, your role is probably the most important. So especially in the Democratic House, we know that the pushback that we typically get on ranked choice voting is that it's complicated and they're not sure that people will be able to understand it. And so being able to articulate to your representatives that this is something that you understand, that it's not difficult and that it's important for democracy is actually, in my mind, really essential. I understand that, of course, I'm the newbie here, but I really take seriously when people take the time to reach out to me and to tell me their thoughts on a particular issue or a particular bill. Like that weighs heavily in how I decide to move forward on it. And so what I would recommend is that, for folks on the ground, the people who are doing the real work, like reach out to your representative and say, this is something that's important to me. I would urge you to support this bill. Even if they don't sign on as a co-author, they could be instrumental in getting it passed through committee. So, and as Representative Pinto pointed out, we're in a much tighter majority than we have been previously. And so really every vote counts, especially when we get to the floor. So we don't want any of those stragglers on the DFL side to say, well, this seems kind of complicated for people. I'm not sure that it's going to work. Convince them, let them know that it will work. It's not that complicated. And obviously what we have been doing hasn't worked great. So let's try something else so that we can get something that works for folks. I think we always underestimate how resilient and how flexible we can be as human beings. When we started this pandemic, we were like, what? We have to stay indoors? We can't talk to people face to face? How is this going to function? And yet look at us all here. We made it. We've done this for almost a year now, and we figured out how to make things work and how to move processes along. Human beings are amazing, and they can do that with voting too. All it takes is a little bit of education and a lot of will on the part of senators, unfortunately, and representatives.
Thank you so much, Representative Hollins. I could not agree more. And Jean, I think we may have time for one more question.
Oh, thanks, Katie. And I'm going to once again give this one to Attorney General Keith Ellison, because people are very worried about the issues regarding voter ID and provisional balloting. And we want to understand the impact of that should they pass.
Well, so as I understand the proposal, I think that, quite honestly, I think that the impact would be that it would cut the amount of people who will get to vote. If those things passed, it would limit and reduce the number of people who have access to the ballot, because there's a lot of people who don't have an ID. It's not legally required to have an ID and to carry an ID around. And if you require that, there will be people who will not get to vote, who may have gotten to vote in prior elections. There was a case in Indiana where 8 nuns who had voted the same place for 30, 40, 50 years were turned away from voting because they didn't have IDs on them. And this is absolutely the case. So that will be the effect. My mind was jumping to what we were going to do to fight it. You know, I'll challenge it in court. I'll get other people to challenge it in court, and we'll organize on the ground to defeat it. But we just defeated this thing only 8 years ago at the ballot. I mean, Minnesotans said no. So why are we doing this again? I agree that Lori Sturdivant's op-ed, if y'all didn't read it, was really good. If somebody could put it in the chat for those who have not seen it yet, it's a bad idea. And if anybody wants me to go on how bad it is, I'll be happy to do so. But I'd like somebody to show me a case of imposter voting. They can't do it. So what are we doing this for? Anyway, that's my take on it. So let me know if you need some elaboration.
And Representative Hollins had her hand up.
I'm sorry. No, it's okay. Keith just gets me fired up. I just like want to talk. But I'm like, we can't even get people to vote for real. Why are we worried about imposter voting? Like, we can't even get people to go when they actually need to. So anyhow, I'm gonna stop.
No, absolutely. Absolutely agree. That's a great point. And thank you for bringing up the LTE. I believe one of my colleagues, my colleague Liz just put that in the chat box. It is a fantastic piece, so please do go ahead and check that out if you're able to. And Senator Kent, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna follow up on what Representative Hollins said, because she's exactly right. I mean, this is about dividing us. This is about scaring people. This is about complete lies again. It's not a coincidence that they've been talking about alleged election fraud for all these years as an excuse to put up barriers to people being able to vote. And now it turned into this big lie that happened last year at the end of the year and is continuing on for some people, which we saw culminate in that horrific day at our Capitol. So, I mean, we've got it, and it's part of the continuing agenda. So that's why we all have to stand up, call it what it is. It is a lie. It is a distraction. It is not about governing effectively. And we need to fight this with everything we've got.
Absolutely. Wholeheartedly agree. And that's a great segue into our call to action on what you all can do to help move this important issue forward. So first and foremost is volunteering. We are currently, we have volunteer phone banks that we do over Zoom every Wednesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. And these are so important in connecting with other people and connecting people with their elected officials on this issue. So we're a grassroots movement and rely heavily on the help and hard work of our volunteers. And we've got a fantastic team of organizers who are eager and happy to help train you and to help walk you through that process so that you're not alone. We have a lot of fun on our phone banks and would love to have you join us. And another powerful tool, as mentioned just a few moments ago, is letters to the editor. Getting the word out via our local printed press. And we also have other opportunities coming up. So please click on that volunteer link and one of our staff members will be in touch with you ASAP.
Hey, Kate, could I just interrupt real quick?
Of course.
I had a few people ask in the chat for Q&A how they can get it going in their community. Why don't you just contact us directly at info@fairvotemn.org and we will help you get that conversation started in your community.
Yes, absolutely. We would be more than happy to do that. Thank you, Jean. And yes, contact your legislators. Obviously, we've heard of the importance of doing that. They are all eager to hear from you. And we want to make sure that we're connecting as many people with their legislators as possible, especially during the pandemic. And of course, contributing. We are a nonprofit and every dollar that you donate makes a huge world of difference. So we appreciate all of your donations.
And George Beck, could you put the volunteer link in for Clean Elections Minnesota? And we'll make sure people have an opportunity to connect directly into the work that you're advocating for. They're really tracking House File 9, so you can get a lot of information there for House File 9, by the way. And then I think we've got a nice tool for you to directly contact legislators. That should be in the link that we send you.
We do, yes. Thank you, Jean. Great. Well, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of our elected officials for joining us today and for all of your hard work, everything that you do for us as Minnesotans, and for all of your advocacy as democracy champions here in our state. We appreciate your work so, so much.
Thank you all for coming. Let's get fired up, as Keith always likes to say. Fire up. This is the year for democracy. We are going to make a lot of things happen. And your support, Attorney General Ellison, in your current role and all the years that have led up to it, and all of the legislators really making this a priority, is giving us all hope that we can get this done. Thank you all, and have a good evening.
Thank you,
everyone.